Hello everybody and welcome to LMM, and it's now time for another episode of Lawrie Goes Loco. We've returned to the Talyllyn Railway. Yes, that's right, the world famous preservation first, where we're going to be looking at something rather important. In fact, today we're looking at one of the single most famous and important locomotives in preservation history. This is Dolgoch, and this is easily the most famous steam locomotive that I have ever reviewed, and it's going to be the most famous locomotive I have ever driven, and I'm exceedingly excited about this. Now, if you've watched all our videos, you'll know in our previous visit to the Talyllyn Railway, I spoke just a little bit about how important the Talyllyn has been for preservation, and without it, that we might have suffered in preservation. Like the birth of the Talyllyn Railway in society spread and gave other people ideas to create other societies, and without it they might not exist. And this here is so very important because when the society opened, this was the locomotive. Number one, Talyllyn was long gone at that point, it was knackered. So Dolgoch was the locomotive that for 2 years kept the railway open. If this had failed, if this had died and the Talyllyn had folded, people might have looked at it and gone, well, that was a daft idea, wasn't it? We don't need to do that. This thing here could very well be responsible for all the heritage stuff that the rest of us enjoy. She is so very important to the heritage movement. It's almost difficult to put it into words. And to be stood here next door to it, this is a bit of a mecca being next door to this. This is almost ground zero. And let's be honest, she is absolutely stunning. It is an incredibly pretty locomotive with very Victorian proportions. This very long chimney, the oilers on the front, and all the brasswork. She is exceptionally beautiful. In fact, very much a work of art. So not only is this so very important because it saved the Talyllyn, it's also important because who built it? She's a Fletcher Jennings, of which there are 6 left in the world, 5 of which are in the UK, and a few years ago they brought all of the 5 in the UK together for an event here. So that was quite an amazing thing to get them together, but they didn't build a huge number of locomotives. But the fact that this is the only working example of a Fletcher Jennings in the world at the moment, that's just mental. This is, at the moment, a totally unique engine with Talyllyn away under overhaul and Captain Baxter on the Bluebell Railway being the only standard gauge one, stopped for an overhaul at some point. For the foreseeable future, if you want to see a working Fletcher Jennings locomotive, Talyllyn and Dolgoch is your only opportunity. It is exceedingly rare and exceedingly special. And particularly in the hearts of the volunteer, she's a very special old lady. So what exactly is it and what makes it a bit more special than anything else? The engine itself was built in 1866 and was loco number 63 for Fletcher Jennings. Now she is very much a unique design. As far as we know, it's the only one built like this, of this size. There literally aren't any others. That's a bit strange. And she's been changed a little bit over the years. Originally, she was delivered without that. That's right, she didn't have a cab, which is strange, considering it was designed to run here in Wales. And you might think that immediately they went, this is a bad idea, we should put a cab on. No, it survived until 1870 before it went back and had the cab fitted, which is just mental. I mean, the people operating this must have been far made of far more sturdy stuff than us, because can you imagine anyone from today would just go, nah, that's where I don't want to do that. But no, these guys operated this throughout the entire year without a cab, which is, yeah, super people, but definitely for this part of Wales needs the cab. Now, when Talyllyn was built, which was the first engine, it was just an 040, and it was renowned for being a bit bouncy. And as such, eventually it was sent back for conversion to become an 042, which made things a bit better. So this one was built presumably with a longer wheelbase to improve the ride, to make things a little bit better. And that in itself has given some problems when it comes to valve gear and the way that it all works. The valve gear is, well, different, to say the least. On a conventional locomotive, you have your eccentrics driven off the rear axle. But if you look straight up now, you'll see that the eccentrics here come off the forward axle, which is not the driven axle. So that's strange, because they are traditionally in what would be called the wrong place, or where the wrong place is what you accept it to be. So they then drive back here, so we've got our expansion links here, which would drive it. So traditionally, the motion goes to the valve spindles would continue on in a that way direction, going back. Although it can't, because the cylinders are at the front of the locomotive. So the motion now double backs on itself, goes that way, through a weird banjo, which you can just see here, that goes either side of the front axle to the valve spindles at the front. It is a very strange way of doing things. Apparently this is the Fletcher Jennings kind of like standard. This is the way they did it. But it's so very different to what I'm used to. I recognise all the components and I see how it all goes together, but it's just a very different way to have everything. It's rather strange. And this, of course, has come about because it has a rather long wheelbase for an 040 narrow gauge locomotive, and the rear axle is all the way back here. And above me is the firebox. So we can't have the motion running through the firebox because it's quite a deep firebox. So this was the workaround solution. And it does work, well, it works rather well considering the engine's been here for God knows how long. And it's still working, so obviously the system does work. Chatting to the gentleman in charge, he says that it has made things a little more challenging to get the locomotive perfectly in time, and you can only really set it perfectly for second notch forward. Everything else is thereabout. So sat next door to the name, we're reminded that it's had this name pretty much the entire time it's been here. It was named Dolgoch after Dolgoch Falls, where the railway runs, and it carried this for most of its life, apart from a period in the 1900s, well, early 1900s, where it became Pretoria for a couple of years. And everyone is a couple of years-ish. Nobody actually knows when it came back to being Dolgoch, but it did. Weird period of time. But apart from that, it's always been Dolgoch, or number 2, as the railway knows that they call all their engines by numbers rather than names. So Dolgoch or number 2. But for you and I and all enthusiasts, she's Dolgoch. Dolgoch weighs about 10 tonnes, and with her cylinders, which are 7 inches and 5/8 by 16 inches, and her 2'3" driving wheels, she develops about 4,100 pounds of tractive effort, which for a tiny little locomotive is actually a hell of a lot, making her it makes her more powerful than quite a few of the other engines on the line. I think Talyllyn itself is more powerful, but the engines that came from Corris are less powerful. So she's quite a lump. It's an impressive little piece of kit. What's most impressive really is when we consider that this is a piece of Victorian engineering. She's like over 150 years old now, and she's still going strong, doing the job she was designed to do, and outperforming the engines that were brought in to replace her. What a credit to the engineering for the old lady. One other thing about the name Dolgoch is it's only ever been painted on this side of the boiler, and that's because on the Talyllyn Railway, the passengers are always on this side. Every station you get on the train on this side, and you also get off the train on this side. So you see the name on this side. In latter years in preservation, it has had a cast nameplate which sits here and the hole's here, and there is one on the far side as well for that. But originally it was only ever seen on this side. Coming around to the front of engine, sat here, one of the most notable features of all the locomotives on the Talyllyn is the fact that it's got buffers. And to the best of my knowledge, with the exception of the Corris Railway, where the other engines that end of the shed came from, this is the only narrow gauge railway that has buffers like this and a drawbar in the middle. So they look a bit like scaled down full size engines. It's a weird look. When you think about it, every other narrow gauge engine you traditionally think of has a central monoblock, big block coupler or interlocking things in the middle. It doesn't have this. This is a very strange layout. And obviously next door to me as well, you can see the pipe for the air brakes. Now originally she didn't have it. This was fitted in the early 1990s. It was fitted with the air brake system, and that's over the pump. It's on the other side, as is the bunker that holds the air tanks and most of the air fittings. Since she was taken out of service in the birth of the Preservation Society in 1952, she sat around for a while the Society tried to get the money and the effort to restore her. But finally, in 1963, she came back into service. And since then, it's basically been in service ever since. Obviously, it has its 10 years, comes out, has work done, comes back into service. doing the job she was built for on the railway she was built for. And there are very, very few other locomotives that can claim such a history of actually doing what they were meant to do their entire lives. In 2009, she failed with a boiler problem, and the opportunity was then taken to do a full strip down and nut and bolt rebuild. And during that, she had a brand new boiler constructed, which was designed to be as near as possible to the original specification that was possible. So it's kind of as good as they can do with modern techniques and modern materials. So pretty good job of making it good and how it should be. She came back in 2011, which was just in time to be ready for the 2014 celebrations of 150 years of the Talyllyn Railway, of which it was very important to have both the original engines in service and working, because you can't have a celebration without the original engines. At the time of shooting, she is now entering the last few years of her boiler ticket before she's due yet another overhaul. And it's hoped that by the time that this bows out, Talyllyn will be back in service. So there will always be a Fletcher Jennings locomotive running on the line. So with the history and what it is basically covered, let's go and have a look inside the cab. Welcome to the cab of Dolgoch, which the most apparent thing that I've noticed is it's it's just pristine. It's very, very clean. So me making a mark on the ceiling with my cap would not be appreciated. It is a narrow gauge engine, so it seems almost stupid to say the cab is a bit low and a bit small, but it is. So that's your first thing. So I'm kind of going to be at this kind of slightly squatted area, working my thighs for the duration of being in here. So, Dolgoch. It is a tiny, tiny boiler straight in front of me. Straight in front of me here, we have the regulator, the gauge glasses either side, which are quite small. Here and here are the handles for the injectors for left hand and right hand, with the water taps being here and over there respectively, and the handbrake being the control here. This one here is for the blower, and then we have a damper just there, and then working our way across, we have these beautiful safety valve springs. Now these have been replaced, so they have numbers on the side here. This one's set to 110 and this one's set to 120. These do not correspond anymore with how they were, because as you can see here, the engine now blows off 160 psi, but the covers around them are quite beautiful, so they've been kept on the locomotive. Moving across to here, we've got two whistles. Up here we have a whistle, which is the loud whistle, and then this little ring here is the other whistle. That is the more quiet whistle, which is the preferred one when it's out on the run. And here we have the steam on for the air pump, for the air brake. This one here is the steam brake, and this one here is the air brake. Now it's worth noting that the steam brake obviously only works on the locomotive, but the air brake is plumbed to only work on the train. So the air brake does not affect the locomotive at all. We've got an immobiliser here for the air brake itself, so we can turn this off. And then here we have the reverser. The gauge here is for the air brake, so we can see how much we've got in the tank and how much we're applying. Moving behind us here, we've got another brake gauge here, so we can see the brakes as we're going downhill, because it is a railway that is, well, all downhill when you're in this direction. So seeing how much brakes you've applied is a useful thing to have. We also have this little box here with a button in it, and you hear that makes a noise. This is the communication. You'll see later that the loco and the carriages are all connected by a wire. So this is how you talk to the guard. By doing this, if you're stationary and you've just coupled up, that means you'd like to do a brake test. If you do it on the run, that means, oh God, oh God, oh God, I need braking assistance. That's it, guys. So, with the cab looked at, it's time to do some prep. So, in here, there is a steam oil reserve that we need to fill up, but that's already been done. And we've also got here some oil for the regulator. But equally, that's already been done, so I don't need to do any of that. So now I'm going to hop off, and we'll go that side and start oiling it up and prepping her ready for service. So before we can light a fire in this, the Talyllyn Railway has this absolutely ingenious way of reducing smoke, well, and mess, and generally making that end a lot more pleasant to be in after you put a fire. So this piece of pipe work that runs along here is the steam for the blower. And the blower goes in this casting here to the blower ring, which is a little ring with holes in it around the blast pipe. And the idea is that when you have the blower on, it blasts steam up the chimney, which encourages the steam to come through. It increases the draft, making sure that the steam goes this way and up the chimney rather than back out the firehole door. Problem with this is if you don't have any steam, it doesn't do anything because there's no steam to go down the pipe, so the smoke will drift back out the firehole door. Presenting to you this ingenious system. So, we've got this rather intelligent little thing here. Now, here, there's a new piece being added with a little bung on it. And we have this amazingly clever little piece here, which works as a screwdriver to loosen that up. We take this bung here out, and then the little screwdriver piece here has got a thread in it, so you can put the bung inside there so you don't lose it, because, I mean, knowing me, I'd have thrown that on the floor and it'd be gone forever. Then we add this entire piece of pipe in here, screw it in, like so, which is scary. There it is. Like that. So it goes in like that. And then we take an airline, which is suspended from the ceiling over there and on a retractable pull thing. Plug this in. Open the valve. And we've now got a working blower. So above us, we've got the shroud. So all the smoke is sent outside and doesn't clag up and make the shed all smoky. And now we've got a draft to encourage the smoke out there. This is genius. This is actually one of the best things I've ever seen for locomotive prep. On the footplate, we have a tiny, tiny firebox, of which, well, honestly, that's almost filled it. So put a couple of pieces of wood in just to start off with to cover the grate, like so. That's honestly, it is possibly the tiniest firebox I've ever worked on. Even I think Ming might be able to. It's a very weird shape. It's a very long box and very, very deep. Cool. So with that, take a match. Well, the nice thing about being inside a shed is I can light a match, get something burning without it being a huge problem. You know, trying to light something outside, you've got wind to contend with, and matches don't like wind. Nice one. Let's get this rag burning. Take those off. Gently drop that in. Oh, your legs. It's more of an awkward angle than a lot of other engines I've crewed. Oh, look at that start to go. Drop that in. Let's go on. And then finally, right, so starting up here, when they put an engine to bed at the Talyllyn, they shut all the valves. So that means we've got to open up steam here for the injector. And with steam valves, it's very important to open them up and then turn them back half turn just to make sure they don't seize in an open position. Open up the steam for the injector this side, and turn it back. And then we've got here steam, which is basically the manifold which runs the blower, steam for the air pump, and a couple of other things. Also, we'll open up the clack this side. I'll do the other side later, but while I'm here, we'll open up this clack this side. Good, we're there. And now to do a very graceful dismount. It's one of the wonderful things about prepping a narrow gauge locomotive is you haven't got that massive height difference anymore. You can just step off the running board. Coming to the front of the engine here, we have the sandboxes, which have rags in them, and a entire bottle of sand that will do some trips. They don't really use the sanders here. So starting off with the lubrication. Here we have some displacement lubricators for the cylinders, which are no longer used. There's a mechanical lubricator on the other side, which again we'll see when we go around there. So these now are just shiny things for show. So I've got my nice little oil can here. We're going to start at the bottom and work our way along. Taking my trusty oil can that was on the footplate, which is, as I'm kneeling down, like chest height. We start off over here and we put some in the valve pack in here. Fill that up nicely. And then move across here. There is a little filler point up there for the bearing for the coupling rod. Fill that up nicely. And now here, a much bigger pot for the slide bar. So we'll fill that up. Like so. And that basically just in there for the bottom slide bar. And then through here, there's a hole and a little divot inside there for the little end. While I'm here, we have this little pot here, and that is the Royal Reserve for the front axle box, which will take a lifetime to fill up with the feeder. So we're just going to take the can, chip that back, and pour straight into there, like so. Sorted. Now we'll address the inside motion in a minute. I'm going to go back there and do the rear axle now. Right, now Dolgoch is in entirely the wrong position to do the big end here and the other end of the coupling rod. So I'm going to kind of wiggle myself in to be able to. It's very conveniently has all these very nice little, oof, lift it up. They're spring loaded, which means I need two hands. Oh, I don't know if I can do this. Yes, I can. There we go. There's an angle. There. That's one. Now, I'm told it's much easier to move the locomotive. That's one. And that's two. To move the locomotive first, but as a professional, I thought the best thing to do was to oil it up before we move it, you know. Good practice and all, because we'd quite like to come back again. And it is quite an important locomotive, so we want to do the prep right. Right, so all that remains to do for this is the axle box inside the cab. So returning back to the cab to do the last axle boxes, which are hidden under here, we have a cursory look at the fire. That's still on fire, so we'll leave that alone. Take off this box, and under here we've got the little reserves for the rear axle boxes. Now, these don't have trimmings in it because the trimmings are in the axle boxes themselves. These are just a simple and easy way to feed them. So we'll just fill this up about 3/4 of the way, and fill that up about 3/4 of the way. And that is now dealt with. So now all I've got to do is attack the prep for the inside motion, which is going to be interesting on I've never done inside motion on a narrow gauge locomotive before, so this will be interesting. You all thought I was going to go underneath. No. Locomotive has got clever holes in the side of the frames here, so we can oil up the bits here, get to the die block, which is in there. He says, trying to get the oil can in the right place. There we go. And in there. Makes it a lot easier. Because of the bonus of the height here, everything is so easy to get to. I can just put a squirt there. Then the biggest challenge is working out how to get the oil can in. But we can drop the oil can down here. So that's inside the drop link itself. That's fine. Then below that is going to be the die block. So I've just got to get down to do the die block like that. And another bit. This is actually not too bad. Right, and then this side we've got put the oil inside the eccentric, like so, and we fill up the eccentrics, which is actually, again, not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I can find the other eccentric. Where is it? There's a bit of oil to go there. Well, like that. Oh, yeah, like that. There it is. Fill that up like so. For going underneath, most narrow gauge engines are a pain in the backside because you can't get that. Talyllyn Railway, well, they've got a pit, which means getting myself in here, tucking in here, and going down underneath. Like so. Oh, it's cramped down here. So these bits above me here are the bottoms of the expansion link, and these are the few bits that I can't reach from above. So just going to reach the oil can around into the, like that. I missed into the divot there and into the divot there. And those are basically the bits that I can't get to. Everything else we've done from the top. This is deceptively easy. I was expecting with this engine for it to be as a Victorian piece of engineering, to be quite challenging, but it's remarkably well thought out. And the Talyllyn Railway have updated and changed a lot of things, like all the braking is now on grease nipples, which are not something that I have to do on a daily basis. They're done on a more long thing, just stick some grease in it. It's not something I do as an oil round. It's remarkably simple. Me and Ben, my cameraman, were both thinking this was going to take a lot longer than it has.
And with that, all that remained to do was stick some steam oil in the mechanical lubricator on the far side and a bit of steam oil into the lubricator for the air pump.
So in order to get the engine out of the shed, we need to open the shed doors. So put that down into there. Where it's not raining at the moment. When did this happen? Right, so now it's out of the shed. It's time to actually put some water in it, which involves not spilling the water everywhere. And putting the hose inside the cab, because it's a well tank. And then turning that. At some point, some water should come out of there. I'll just keep going. And hopefully I'm going to be shouted at before it overflows everywhere. Oh, I can hear it now. What a cracking piece this is. Wow, the chimney is proper close to the roof. So, with Dolgoch out of the shed, we have the vintage train out. These are the carriages that Dolgoch would originally pulled when the railway first opened. So this is a real treat. I talked before about having the right engine for the right train, but today we're really doing it properly. The Talyllyn have been very, very kind to us. So we have to take this nice diddy little coupling here and put it on. So we'll dip the short end over the train and the slightly longer end over the locomotive and then reach across to do it up. Like so. And one more for luck. Relatively tight, and then air pipes go together. They line up like so, and then push down to hold it together. Open the taps. That will now pump air into the whole system. The only thing we haven't done, which we don't normally do, is we've got power.
With our train firmly attached, we set off down to Talyllyn Wharf, ready to run Dolgoch round the train, put it on the front, and then I was going to get on the regulator and take this absolutely amazing and priceless locomotive out for a run. And to say that I was a little bit nervous was, well, an understatement.
So here we go with Dolgoch. We're about to get up the line with some of its vintage coaches, so an appropriate train. So this is easily the most famous locomotive I've ever driven. And I'm a little terrified, so brake off, give it a whistle, and gently open the regulator. Very gently, and wait for, well, that. Now I'm told as soon as we get this moving, we bring it back into second notch. There are two notches on the reverser. One is start, one is go, and that's about as advanced as it goes. And immediately I'm in love with this. It is absolutely gorgeous. everything about it, the proportions of the high cab, the low slung boiler, just, it screams character. There's nothing else I've ever driven that has anything like this sensation. It kind of almost feels, it's got a toy-like quality to it driving, and it's also weird having to be slightly stooped in the cab. But it's possibly one of the best things I've ever driven. And such an honour. Like, I feel like I shouldn't be here doing this because of just what Dolgoch is. And that's just amazing. Now we've opened up a little bit, and I don't know if you can hear that, but the sound from the chimney is just superb. She's got such a lovely little bark to her. And we've got about maybe 12 tonnes behind us at the moment. And she is just so unfazed by that. I don't know what she would pull, but I've hardly cracked the regulator, and we're stonking along here. Now, I know that the railway gets a lot steeper further ahead, and on bits that we're not going on. But she is just, it's a stroll for her. It's an absolute stroll. Now, as for the ride on it, she bounces around a little, but it's far better than I ever would have imagined. She's a long wheelbase, and so there's no like wobbling from side to side. It's very much a slow bounce, but it's far, far more stable than other four-wheelers I've been on, which really buck and kick. It's just, you feel the rails on it, you can feel where the track dips rather than the locomotive itself. The locomotive, I think, rides really well. I think it's more bouncing around on track. It's superb. Listen to that. That is a happy noise right there. It's absolutely magnificent. And considering this really is Victorian engineering, still going strong, doing the job pretty much it was designed for. That's special. That really is very, very special. Looking forward, our visibility is superb. I have one very long chimney blocking my view, and actually in front of me I've got a whistle as well. But apart from that, I can see wonderfully. Compared to most steam locomotives, the visibility on this is absolutely superb, and obviously backwards where I can see forever. The only thing I can't do is I can't open the window, so if it's raining, I'm not sure what happens. I guess the view, problem solved. We stick the head out the front. It's great. It's a wonderful view looking forward with such an incredible noise. Oh, just a beautiful, beautiful regulator that is really very, very easy to control. That's absolutely wonderful. So now we're out on the run, there's one thing to do, which is to have a go at the brakes. So we'll shut the regulator, full gear, bring it round to the lap. So if we hold it here, we've got a gentle, slow brake on, and we can hold that on a lap. And you can feel that starting to slow us down. However, if we really want to stop, we go all the way, and everything stops. So that would be an emergency brake, and that dumps all of the air out of the system, and we very much stop. Just moving a bit over past the lap position, it slows the amount of air going in, so the brakes are applying, but you're applying everything in a slower way than, well, that. So with that done, I'm realising the train will stop, well, from when I applied it to stopping, we've done like a carriage length. They're pretty good. So with that, we'll carry on. I'm going to use the steam brake for the rest of this. By the way, because we've got 4 coaches on, and brake applications like that are really quite unnecessary. For a tiny little engine, this thing handles remarkably well. Considering we've only got the 4 on, for the rest of this, I'm just going to use the steam brake because it seems almost a bit overkill to use the full air brake. So we'll try that and see what this stops with the train. Steam brake works pretty well as well at getting this thing to stop. There's no weight behind us, effectively. What could this do with then to make it any better? Well, I could do with a seat just so I don't have to be at this kind of stooped angle, or maybe a hole in the roof for my head. But that really is me being quite pernickety with something that is really quite wonderful. I suppose in the summer they might want windows that open for a bit of extra breeze, but really, this is perfection as far as narrow gauge goes, I think. It is amazingly controllable with this regulator. You could rock it just a tad. I've got one hand resting on the brake and also on the regulator at the same time. I can just knock it back a tiny bit to give it a little more power, and she responds. It's just a fantastic thing. And it's well worth pointing out just how good it is. There's nothing that leaks on here. All the brass has been cleaned. Everything is in good condition. The paint is clean on it. It's just the amount of care that the Talyllyn put into looking after their engines is just phenomenal. And it's one of those things you kind of got to see it to believe how good these little engines are, or at least this one is. It's just mind-bogglingly good, and the railway should be so proud of it because it's amazing. And for all of us, I mean, the chance to drive this, which is effectively a living, breathing part of all of our combined heritage, and frankly, part of the reason that I'm doing this anyway, because without Dolgoch and without the Talyllyn, there would be no preservation, really. This is what kick-started everything. We're now coming up to a bridge, so as I mentioned before, we got 2 whistles on this. So this is a wonderful opportunity to see what they're both like. I love 2 whistles. It's probably the best thing ever. Oh, I enjoy that very, very much. Having 2 whistles is a superb thing. Now, I was expecting a narrow gauge engine to feel slightly less powerful, to feel like it hasn't got as much oomph. But it's fantastic. She feels like she's a thoroughbred. She wants to go stonking away on a long run. I guess that is the difference. All the narrow gauge engines I've driven before are basically industrial things, whereas this is actually built and designed to go for a run. In fact, this is built and designed, it was bought to do this. How many engines can you get on that actually go and do what they were purchased to do? This is working where it's always been. This is what it's always done. I've joined that long list of drivers who've driven this on doing what it's meant to do. And there's something really magical about that. There's something magical about the Talyllyn full stop, but trundling through the Welsh countryside on Dolgoch, I genuinely can't think there's much better in the entire world. Especially with the vintage coaches behind. I mean, looking ahead now, I could have done it. I've travelled back in time. There is nothing ahead of me that gives me any concept. Apart from you guys, the camera hanging in the cab, there is nothing that gives me any concept that I am in 2020. As far as I'm aware, I'm doing this for real. It's 150 years ago, and this is the cutting edge of technology. And frankly, that makes me very, very happy. I started out doing YouTube and started working and doing things with locomotives, I never for a second dared dream that I'd get to drive something like Dolgoch, because there is all that heritage in it, and there's all that history and all that grandeur with it. I can't really tell you guys just how much of an honour it is to be on the footplate and to be given the regulator and to really feel what she's like. It's just the most incredible experience. And again, having the carriages behind and actually going the train, it's just fantastic. It is fantastic. And I don't think I've ever been quite so excited about a regulator that it's absolutely perfect. Now, it's worth pointing out that I'm not sure if you are aware how much I am enjoying this. This whole experience is particularly special, and I am having a lovely time. Do you like the whistle? Do you like the whistle? The views as we trundle through here. It's not a particularly nice Welsh day, but it is dry. But winding through the Welsh countryside on a Victorian locomotive, it's wonderful. It's just wonderful. It's a special railway, guys. You really, if you haven't been, need to visit the Talyllyn. And the age-old question, would I have it? No, I wouldn't. Because I can't imagine anything worse than taking her away from her home now. She's perfect, and she's perfect here. But I wouldn't take her away, because this is where she should be, and where she should always be, at the Talyllyn. So guys, that's the end of this video looking at Dolgoch, easily the most famous locomotive I have ever had the privilege to drive. And frankly, I have loved every single second of it. It is just an honour. It's an amazing thing to be on the footplate of. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and a massive thank you to the Talyllyn Railway for allowing me to come down and drive their running flagship. Thank you. It really has been a true honour. And if you like what you've seen here at the Talyllyn and you want to know more, then a link to the website is in the video description. And if you really like what you've seen in this video and you'd like to get involved with the railway, there's also the email if you want to get in contact and say, I'd like to learn how to drive Dolgoch, or just be part of the railway. They are an incredibly lovely group of people. It's one of the most friendly heritage railways I have ever visited, and I cannot recommend enough coming over here for a visit and frankly, getting involved.
And if you've really enjoyed this video and you want to give something back to the railway to say thank you for letting me come along and shoot this video for you guys to enjoy, then consider donating something to the Talyllyn Railway Appeal Fund to help them survive and continue running through and after COVID. This railway is a true gem, and to see it disappear is almost unthinkable. So if you want to help out, the railway would be so very grateful to you guys. And you never know, they might just let me come back again if you guys help out. So let's just make sure this one doesn't disappear, right guys?
So guys, that's the end of this. Please like, subscribe if you haven't already. Comment on this video, let me know if you've enjoyed seeing Dolgoch. If you've got a locomotive and you'd like me to come and review it, drop us an email. The link to that is in the video description to our website for getting in contact. And there's also the link there for our Discord if you want to chat to us. And of course, guys, please share this video with your railway friends. Help us grow even bigger. We've got to drive Dolgoch at this stage. Imagine what we can do if we grow even bigger. Thanks, guys. It's been wonderful. So if you've enjoyed this and you want to see another video we've done here at the Talyllyn, click up here. And if you're really enjoying narrow gauge steam, how about clicking down here for Ming at the Great Bush Railway? We'll see you later, guys. Goodbye.